the roll.
Mrs. Bros.
Here.
Mrs. Bendel.
Here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. Miller.
Here.
Dr. Schlepper.
At this point, I'd like to call for nominations for president for the 2023 year.
I would like to nominate Sharon Bros as president. This will be her 8th year serving on the Board of Education, and during that time, she's put a great deal of time and effort into the service of this district in many different roles and capacities. She served as president during the past year, and her leadership, along with that of Dr. Penzarski and the administration, I believe have moved our district forward in a positive and collaborative manner. I'm looking forward to seeing that work continue, and I appreciate her willingness to continue to serve in this capacity.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the nominations for president?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Bros.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And can we take a vote to
Mhm.
elect Mrs. Bros president?
Yes, members will state the name of the individual whom they're voting for. It's the way it's supposed to be. So Mrs. Bendel,
Sharon Bros?
Mrs. Bros,
Sharon Bros.
Mrs. Garvey,
Sharon Bros.
Mrs. Miller,
Sharon Bros.
and Dr. Schlepper.
Sharon Bros.
Congratulations.
We have a running joke at my house on election day as to whether or not my husband actually votes for me for the Board of Ed. I had that moment just now where I was like, do I vote for myself?
At this point, can I have nominations for vice president?
I would like to nominate Lori Bendel as the Vice President for the Board of Education. During her tenure, she has been a tireless advocate for our students, and she has advanced many important components of the board's work, namely policy, finance, budget, athletics, and curriculum and instruction, just to name a few. She's also served as the board's high school liaison. Her efforts have advanced our district in a number of ways, promoting efficiency, strategy, and community engagement. And I'm proud to nominate her for this post and look forward to serving with her in the coming year.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the nomination?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, can we take the roll?
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And can we now take a vote for the vice president?
Yes, please state the name of the person who you're voting for. Mrs. Bendel,
Lori Bendel,
Mrs. Bros,
Lori Bendel.
Mrs. Garvey,
Lori Bendel.
Mrs. Miller,
Lori Bendel.
Dr. Schlepper.
Lori Bendel.
Congratulations to you.
thank you. And at this point, we'll do the oath of office.
Okay, Mrs. Bros, do you first. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as President of the Board of Education of the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village School District, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? The answer is I do.
I do.
Mrs. Bendel, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village School District, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do. And at this point, I would like to hand the gavel over to our president, Sharon Bros. Switch seats.
Everybody ran for the office of President.
That's right.
All right, moving along. And I have a motion for board item 2.04.
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
This item calls for the appointment of the board's legislative liaison, which I would like to appoint Catherine Garvey to the position of. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to? I think that's all we need to do in this particular. It also has the calendar for board meetings for the 23-24. It's actually the 23.
Calendar
Okay.
year.
Does anyone have any changes or concerns about the calendar as proposed? Yeah, okay.
Board meeting calendar.
Yes, the board
Just to be
meeting.
clear.
Board meeting calendar, not the.
We got lots of calendars.
Okay, did we get a second on that?
We did. Dr.
Okay.
Schlepper second.
Ashley, can
You
you
already
take the
did.
roll, please?
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
All right. Could I have a motion for agenda item 3, board resolutions 3.01 through 3.18?
So moved.
Do we have a second? I'll second. So just to walk through everyone, we're in a very different place this year, which is fantastic. We have board members who have now been on the board for a year, so they understand the rhythm of the annual meeting and exactly what we're doing here. But for other people who may be interested, this is the part in the meeting where the board delegates responsibilities that the district needs, that the superintendent and treasurer need to operate the district on a continuing basis. So things such as calling for a calamity day typically fall to the board for responsibility, but to prevent having to call a special meeting at 3 a.m. to decide whether or not to open schools. At this point in the meeting, we delegate that type of responsibility. So I can just go through these quickly in case you're interested. 2.01 is the ability of our treasurer to pay district debts. 02 is to set up a deposit arrangement, so we receive our revenues from the Cuyahoga and Geauga County auditors. 03 is to grant professional leave to staff as needed. 04 is to identify the superintendent as district purchasing agency, and in her absence, the DOSI, Director of Operations and Strategic Initiatives. 05 is for the superintendent to employ temporary personnel. 06 is for the Board of Education to appoint the ESC of Northeast Ohio as a hearing officer for student discipline matters. 07 is for the superintendent to serve as our representative to the Ohio School Athletic Association. 08 is for the superintendent to accept resignations. 09 is to invoke emergency action in the event of a situation to enable the schools to continue to operate or to close. 010 is to update instructional materials and textbooks as needed. 011 is procedure relating to parent notification requirements. 012 is for the superintendent to seek and participate in grants on the behalf of the district. 013 is to name representatives of the local media, the Plain Dealer, the Chagrin Valley Times, and the Chagrin Soul and Sun as our official news media outlets. 014 is to assign legal counsel, which we use several firms. Those are listed in the agenda. And 016 is to participate in commercial property tax appraisal, reevaluation conversations or hearings. 17 is the board giving authorization for retirement employee pickups, and 18 is approving the annual tax budget for the fiscal year 2023. Any questions, comments? No. Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And then in other business, we have attached the schedule for and information for who is going to be representing on the district advisory committees. These are committees that we put in place last year for the first time. And we decided to keep the representation the same because it's really been, taken some time to sort of get them going and figure out who's serving on what. They all have community representatives as well, so we're building expertise among each of those. And the board role as liaisons to each of the building. I think you're building relationships with each of the buildings too, which has been very helpful. So I'm excited. I don't know if you read the board brief that just was released a few days ago, but I feel like we're at really a great place as a board. Everybody's really come together and knows their strengths, what they have to contribute, where they want to bring their voice and their expertise. And towards the end of last year, I was really beginning to see people contributing in different ways and everybody stepping up and being able to share the workload, which is very rewarding. And it's what our community wants of us because we each have different skill sets and a different voice. And when those come together, we make our district stronger. So I appreciate the nomination for serving as president again this year. And I'm really excited for the momentum that we have and to see where this year takes us. And with that, do we have any other conversation for other business? Nope. Okay, then could I have a motion to adjourn the organizational meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yep.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
All right. Is it 7 o'clock?
No.
Only 15
We'll
minutes.
have a 15-minute break before we start the regular meeting, which is when we will start with our student showcase. So I promise we won't keep you here all night. We have some intermediate school students here with us tonight who have expressed that they're a little nervous. So they're going to help me kick off this meeting and get some of their own tension out. So the first thing that I do at the meeting, just to make sure that everybody in the audience knows that we need people to be quiet and paying attention, is to bang the gavel. Historically, I don't use it very much after the beginning of the meeting, but there have been times when we've used it. So if you want to go ahead and give it a bang. Thank you. Perfect. You can each have one. Yeah, because it doesn't get used very often. All right. Good. Thank you. Oh, go ahead. All right, I would like to call to order the regular board meeting for the Chagrin Falls Board of Education for January 11th. Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Here.
Mrs. Bendel. Here. Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. Miller,
Here.
Dr. Schlepper.
Here.
If you would all join me to stand and face the flag. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mrs. Garvey to introduce our student showcase.
All right, so tonight, students are going to be presenting on the operation of a new laser engraver that's here at the intermediate school. The engraver was purchased through a generous donation from the Education Foundation. Without their support, this presentation and the innovation space would not be what it is today. So we want to say thank you to them. To operate the machine, students must first learn the basics of a program called Canva. After they develop a project in Canva, then they move their planning to GlowForge. GlowForge is an application that's used for the laser engraving. This evening, we're excited to have Ms. Packard as well as several students from her innovation class who will not only discuss the process, but also show us how the laser engraver actually works in real time. Welcome.
So before we get started, I just want to introduce the amazing students I brought with me to demonstrate how to go from design and creation to a print in the laser engraver. So we got Margaret, Lily, Charlotte, Addie, and then Grant. We brought the GlowForge down with us. It's in the back corner over there. So if you hear the low humming, that's the air filter. There's a project running on it now that we created, but we also are going to create one for you right now. So I'm gonna let you guys go.
Hold on, we're gonna get you.
We really want to hear. So Mr. Doherty's going to take care of you. There we go. Not your initial.
Okay. So
Wait, can we turn it up a little?
Just
Keep
hold it a
talking,
little
Evan.
closer.
There you go.
so let's go to elements first. So we're gonna type in Tigerpaw outline. And so there's a bunch of different categories like graphics and photos. So photos would be a little harder to use because there's more detail in them. And there's like different backgrounds and stuff. So it'd be harder for GlowForge to pick it up. So we can go to graphics. And so let's pick the pink tiger paw. And so pink wouldn't come up as easy on GlowForge because it's harder to read. And so it's like too light almost. So a good color to use would be black. So we can change all the colors to black by pressing those little color boxes and then moving them to black. And so you can also pick just one that's white and that would turn out black on there. So it'd be a little darker than that one. And so you can also pick a tiger hand up there. And so it would be a little hard for the GlowForge to pick up the orange in it because it would kind of blend into the black for it. So it'd be hard to tell for GlowForge. So if you just turn it black, it would kind of look like that in it. and it would be hard to read when you're looking at it. So now I'm gonna pass the microphone to Grant.
So once you pick the image you want, and you might want some text, so you just go over to the text box and you can pick any one you want, but let's just pick shine for right now. And then there's 3 individual text boxes and you can delete one at a time to make it a little smaller and easier to use. But you see how the shine is like shining towards you and is yellow? So if you don't want the yellow because it's harder to pick up, and you should change it to black. And then you see that it's still like shining at you, you go to effects and you click none. And then it has no effects, and this would be easier. But because of the line right through the letters, it's harder for the Glowforge to pick up, and unless you want like a line through it, I wouldn't recommend that one. But like a one like the Be Brave font, you just change the color to black, and then you go to effects and you click none, and then it just comes out bold and there's no lines, nothing. And this is the ideal font for Glowforge outlines and stuff like that. Now I'm gonna hand it off to Charlotte.
So to get it on to the Glowforge app, you're gonna want to press share. Then you're gonna want to press download. And then you'll always want to have transparent background in PNG, or else it won't do everything right. And then you're gonna press download. Then go to the Glowforge app. And then you're gonna press the big plus, then upload. And then you'll have whatever you want. And then you're gonna open it. And then it's there. Passing it to Margaret.
And then what you're seeing right now is the camera inside of the Glowforge, and it's showing you that you've already used it multiple times. That's what those big black squares are. And it's showing you that you already have material in. And then Lily, she's going to change the material to make it sure it's medium or orange acrylic so that it doesn't print incorrectly, because if you do the wrong material, it'll print incorrectly because the acrylic is thicker than the wood. And so it'll like mess up the print. So it'll like make it lighter on the acrylic and so you won't be able to see it. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to just readjust it to where we want it to be. And then we're going to click the almost like the shapes button right there and to make an outline. So basically what that outline is going to do is make sure it'll cut it out instead of just engrave it, which basically the difference is, I have a example. Like engraving is just like a little bit here and it won't go through the back, but in cutting it out, we'll just make sure it's like cut out as a shape instead of just engraving it onto the material. So then what we're going to do is we're going to press the print button and see if it works, because we already have something printing. Okay, so it's cooling down right now, but usually what it would do is it would show how much time is left on the print, or like how much time it would take to print. So since we've done it on the computer and not actually on the Glowforge, once we do that, we're gonna have to actually go to the Glowforge and press a flashing white or blue button, and that'll kind of start printing it out. You can kind of see we've kind of already printed something out there. But that's basically what you do to print something out, and those are kind of all the steps. So. Oh, and we have a gift for all of you guys. So we're just gonna go grab that really fast.
So cool. I want to go play with it.
The students made these on the laser engraver and they 3D printed the little stands that you have. So this is all student made. We've been working very hard on this for the last couple of weeks.
Oh,
love it.
Thank
you.
Oh, neat. Yeah. We use these instead
It's a
of
good thing
these.
that happened today.
Can we get rid of the ugly brown ones?
Thank you, guys. This is great. Thank you.
Look at this one. Did you see this? Hold on, let's show it. All of it.
Here's another one that we, one of the.
Oh, cool.
Very cool.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, the microphone. So this is what, it does have a little bit of like acrylic
Yeah.
dust on it. But this is kind of what it would look like if you would print something on the Glowforge.
This is good looking. Well, no, we'll pass them. We'll show you.
Very cool.
So what's the most interesting thing you've done with this technology?
Probably the, this, probably this one.
Yeah.
This big piece. It took a long time for me and Addie to come up with.
The design.
We also had to remake it because the text was a little harder to read. So we actually changed it to like the one that we showed.
And we also made this with the 3D printers. We made the little stands too.
It's really cool.
Those are cool.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
I mean, I'm sort of in awe. Earlier last year, I needed some graphic work done and I was like, I gotta hire a graphic designer. And one of my children who went to school here was like, you just use this thing called Canva. And I was like, what? How? Oh, okay. I think maybe you guys don't even recognize what you just rolled out in terms of ability to do this. You've learned so much that's just, it will give you so much of an ability to show ideas that you have to create and to do something that's unique to you, express any talents that you might have too. And so I'm very, very grateful as a board member to our support organizations for making this type of experience available to you. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Penzarski for prioritizing having staffing to tie it to a curriculum and really make sure that it's grounded in an educational outcome for our students. We're working on strategic planning right now, and in the spring, we hope to have more ideas about how to make your education inspiring and interesting and make you want to come to school every day. And these are the types of things that distinguish us, and our support organizations are all eager to support you guys, which is really just very exciting for us.
So what I think, if you're interested, and I'm sure Mr. Howe will let you, is that I have a wonderful support organization called Intercouncil. And they like to go around and visit different things that are going on in our district. And you happen to have the Innovation Lab, which they helped fund. So maybe next month we can bring them here and you can give them the same presentation and show how you're doing all this work. So they would come over. They usually come on board meeting mornings. So if you would like, I know Gurney Garden Club took them around. That was an off-campus kind of field trip for us. So maybe we can come here and you can show us more things and how you use the lab.
But they're really nice too, so you don't have to get nervous. You can see their stress levels already like, it's done.
Do you have any other questions? For the group?
No.
I just want to thank you. That was great. You're very articulate. You took a lot of time planning, and we love our gifts.
Yes,
You can
thank
come
you.
anytime and give us gifts.
All right, so we are going to continue our meeting, which is very interesting and exhilarating, and you are welcome to stay and learn about board governance, or you may not have eaten dinner and you might want to go home and do homework and have dinner with your family. So we'll give you a couple minutes to clear out if you'd like, but thank you for coming.
Thank you,
And
guys.
I'll see you next month with the
Next
tour.
month.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great.
So cute.
They're so cute.
This will get me more respect at home. I wonder if I should-
I just on my desk. I love it.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So much.
I spelled it right and everything.
I know, that was the thing. I was like, wow, I got this.
I know.
Treasure, AKs.
What's-
HBF.
Like all these little shops and stuff, they just have these little long things of wood.
I want one that
Say,
says mom.
French life and then
Mm.
you know, all those
For my desk.
a like fundraiser.
Ask one of your kids to make it for you.
Yeah.
Like t-shirts.
We lost that.
Make ornaments.
Yeah.
Christmas lights. Right? But like at Christmas time, they could make ornaments that have like tigers.
I had to go do like, but it was personalized, stuff like that.
Telling you. Lots of fundraiser opportunities here.
All right. Moving along, can I have a motion for the December 7th approval of minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
No rest for the weary over there, Mrs. Bruno. Go. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, who made the motion?
Lori.
I made the motion.
Okay,
And Lauren seconded.
got that. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Sorry. At this point in the meeting, we will give updates on the district advisory committees. Mrs. Miller, would you please update us on the work of the strategic planning committee?
Yes, so the strategic coordination team has had, I think, 2 meetings since our last meeting. And each inquiry team has also had several meetings. Just to do very brief summary on what each inquiry group is up to. The staff and student wellness group has sort of coalesced around the idea of belonging, especially where students are concerned, and stress management when it comes to staff, and are having conversations around those 2 topics. The high quality learning group is in 3 groups, 3 subgroups. One is kind of an internal group, examining what we have done well, what's going well based on internal data. Another group examining sort of outside sources to evaluate the same things. And then there will be a 3rd group starting their own focus groups around future fluencies. And the strategic resourcing group has sort of 3 subgroups as well. One around infrastructure and facilities, another around college and career readiness, and then a 3rd one around partnership. So all of the groups are sort of in the space where they've narrowed things down and are in the process of starting and conducting focus groups, and then intend to bring their recommendations to the coordination team probably in March. So that's where we are there. Our last SCT meeting, we spent a lot of time talking about these books that Dr. Pinzarski generously gave us. There are 6 different books. The first one, we'll start with this one, What School Could Be by Ted Dintersmith, The Innovator's Mindset by George Couros, Learning for Uncertainty by Zhao and McDermott, Learners Without Borders by Young Zhao, Building School 2.0 by Chris Lehman, and Counting What Counts by Young Zhao. And Dr. Pinzarski had copies of all of these in her little lending library, which I'm sure that she would be happy to lend to anyone who would want to read about it. But these books pretty much just tackle all the big questions of education from slightly different angles. Big picture questions like just the general importance of public school, the need for innovation in the way we do school just to keep up with a changing world. Questions around testing, are we assessing what matters? And just generally, we're keeping kids curious rather than, quashing their creativity. So those are sort of examples of the kind of things we're talking about, just to take a big picture view on the future of education and sort of where we fit into it.
Any questions?
I'll bring what few books I have to the next board meeting in case there's anything you'd like to pick or read. They got pretty picked over on
Yeah. It was a great, there were great conversations. We split up into groups and groups read different books, but really inspiring conversations. And I'll send an email to the board because there's a couple TED Talks that have been
yeah.
referenced too. Which I don't have. Do you have? We can put an email together. That might be interesting for people just to watch so that you have an idea of the types of conversations that are being.
Yeah, embracing a different way. That was the last one.
And then there was one that I was at the December meeting. That's or there was a documentary that was referenced.
Oh, that's most likely to succeed. Yeah, which is on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
It's won a bunch of awards too. It's really.
I mean, a lot of great work. The people, we should be very thankful to the staff in the district who are giving a tremendous amount of time to this effort, and also to the community members and students who are supporting the effort. It's really, people are working hard to come up with something inspiring for our kids. And then intercouncil met this morning. It was another fantastic meeting. Mr. Doherty shared with us a software program that will centralize the grant process and facilitate the organizations collaborate with each other to figure out who's doing which grants, and then with the goal of funding all of the needs that come both from the student, from the staff in terms of mini grants, but even larger grant requests that will come out of the strategic plan initiative. And that we are going to have a special meeting on Friday because we would like to sign the contract. It's $3,000 a year, but it is actually, we get a lot of return for the $3,000 in terms of the functionality that it will support and the conversations that we'll be able to have. But they would like to kick it off for this grant season. So we need to have a special meeting to approve that contract. Because it was just decided today that we would do that. And also in the intercouncil, I shared with them my own fatigue and asked for their assistance in helping us continue to message the positive work that the district is doing. You know that we had a rumor that was circulating in December that was false, but I shared with them my concern when it goes to community members that think the school district is doing things that we're not doing, and how important it is for us to continue to bring in people who live in this community who don't know all the great work that's being done and don't know how education has changed to support our students. How much we could use their help, because when something circulates that isn't factual, it takes away the valuable time of our administrative team in terms of chasing things back and figuring out. There's always a kernel of truth. So where did this come from? And then how did it get misconstrued? And it would be great if we could just, have people, if they hear something that doesn't sound right to them, pick up the phone and email us or call us or reach out to the teacher or superintendent and try and get everybody really supporting and celebrating the great work that's being done in the district currently.
And just to acknowledge that there were people who actually did pick up the phone and call
Yes.
us and say, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't seem right, what's going on? And that was hugely helpful, and that we really appreciate when people just ask us the question.
Absolutely. Then updates from all of the organizations. Tiger Prep is in the process of trying to put together a seminar on IEPs to support parents. Community Education said that their new programming went really well, and they're looking forward to continuing to pilot new programs and then to put some of the pilot programs into the program on an ongoing basis. PTO and the Ed Foundation are working with Jen Banco and Mike Doherty on this book study behind the scenes. I apologize if there's someone else that's involved in working. Okay. Which I think has already generated a tremendous amount of interest. There's already close to 50 people signed up, and they just started publishing new information on it a few days ago. So that's exciting. The Ed Foundation will be having their annual pancake breakfast on March 5th. Mark your calendars. some of the best pancakes around. Spark is planning a meeting on test anxiety. The PTO has their fundraiser, their high school fundraiser, the night at the Greenville coming up on January 20th. They'll have guest bartenders from parents and community members. The administrative team will not be participating as guest bartenders, which we appreciate. Safe Routes gave us a great update that they have been working with the village to address the snow removal process. It's specifically to the areas where there are crosswalk curbs, where it's, a resident is responsible for their sidewalk, but they might not go into the crosswalk, and our students need those crosswalks to cross at the light, across at intersections, and then the snow plows often come along and pile the snow up there, making it even harder for a Good Samaritan. I know Lisa Fetterman has been very helpful for in many instances of getting out there and actually doing the walk in front of the high school herself, which we appreciate, but it's not her responsibility. So I appreciate that Safe Routes is made progress in addressing that situation. And then Boosters, they're all actually in the process of beginning their scholarship applications. I don't know exactly when they're due, but they're due shortly. Boosters will also be having an online auction from March 17th to the 19th. It replaced their annual dinner. It's going to run from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. And they have some very exciting auction items specifically for parents who have seniors. They tend to give away parking spaces for graduation and a few seats for graduation, which are always in high demand. So that's the update from, we had how many people? 20 something people in the room today. It was fantastic. They're all, we just very much appreciate our support organizations and the way they contribute to the work of the district. It really gives our kids something that in a small district like ours, we wouldn't be able to do without parent and community volunteers. So. Okay, moving along, I will pass the conversation finally over to Dr. Brinzowski.
Interesting conversation. First of all, I do want to acknowledge though that it is Board Recognition Month. So January, if you didn't know you had a month, you have a month. And we are so happy to have all of you as part of our Board of Education and leading the charge for what we do in this district. And I do have certificates for you, and I will give those to you on Friday. Those are from the Ohio School Board Association. But again, just so thankful for the work you did this year. I know that it might have been different work than had been done in the past, but I'm really excited about the groups and the organizations and the progress that we're making. So thank you so much. And then calendar, everyone wants to talk about calendar, and it's a great thing to talk about because I think what was kind of nice about a different kind of calendar getting the votes or the most votes gave us the opportunity to really talk about why the process is the way it is. And so it gave us an opportunity because when you've had majority votes in the past, calendars just seem to kind of flow through. We never really know what the process is. And so this really gave us a chance to step back and to show and explain why the law is set up the way it is and how this all works. So if you remember from last month, we talked about the process of how the calendar is made in the district. And so the negotiated agreement with the union sets the parameters for how we do that. And basically 3 calendars are put out to our staff to be able to vote and say, this is the calendar that we would like you to recommend to the board. We did that this year. The calendar, there was no majority because 2 calendars were kind of very similar. And I explained sometimes when you have 3 items and 2 are very similar, you'll oftentimes not get a majority vote for any calendar. But we did have a calendar that received the most votes. And so we presented that calendar here. One question that was asked about that calendar was it a viable calendar? Because nothing like that had ever been presented to the board to approve before. And the answer is yes. And in fact, every year I've been here, once I looked a couple years back, there has always been what I'm just going to call a late start calendar. It's just never been the majority pick, which is why you've never seen that type of calendar before last month. Then what's required is that we introduce the calendar, we introduce the components, and by law, you don't vote on it at that meeting, you voted on the next one so that you get feedback. And I think that was a new experience as well, because people had never thought about giving feedback to what was presented. And so the feedback came in, we gave the venues for that feedback to come, and we had diverse feedback, but we also had some similarities. Then what I did was I took my calendar committee, my district calendar committee, district administrators from my cabinet, and we went through all of the feedback. And we went through the calendar and we weighed what pros and cons would be of changing things in the calendar, who was impacted. And remember, our top motto is students, right? So how is this impacting the educational experience of the students when or if we would change something? What was really interesting is when we looked deeply at that calendar, the one piece that we thought might be important and was important to Chagrin. Every school district has different ways that they feel comfortable or that they want to have their calendar work. And it was to have those midterm exams done before the winter break. Now, some people didn't understand how you could look at the other calendar and say that the exams were after break, because it doesn't really say exams are during this week. But what the contract says is that records day for teacher would be the day immediately following the end of the semester. And that was on January, I believe, 19th. And so the only change that the calendar committee made was to move that records day from the 19th to the Friday like it was this year before winter break. So if the public looked at the calendar last month and went through it, and you'll see the calendar that's available on the agenda for tonight, the only change is the movement of that records day. Now, what does that really mean and what happened? So the team went through and looked at every class that was only offered for a semester. And we can only look at this year, right? Because next year's schedule's not developed. But when we went through the calendar and went through the votes and we looked at how the first semester only classes would be impacted by a few less days than second, because they're kind of similar to this year, but it would mean a few more days that they would not have for instruction. What does that really mean? Who's impacted? How does that work? So we found that there were 3 teachers at the high school that would have first semester classes that would be different than second semester classes. And so then the team said, we think we can find innovative ways to even allow extra time that first semester, so that if the teachers and students needed additional help or wanted additional instruction to ensure that everything was mastered, we think we have some ideas of how to support those first semester only classes. The other question that came up when we talked about it and was really interesting is, I don't think people think that calendars should be balanced, right? So when we think about semesters, we start off by thinking they should be the same, because that makes sense. You have the same number of days first semester as second semester. But there are barriers that you have to consider in that second semester. So the second semester has some additional days off that you have to take into account, and that can be calamity. Now, you can't anticipate that you're going to have 1 day calamity day or 5 calamity days. But you kind of take into account that if you have extra days, you can use that in that second semester to be able to have a little bit of a buffer zone. The other thing is to consider is testing across the board. Because when you think about testing, it all happens, the bulk of it happens that second semester. And so that's why we always put extra days in that second semester, so that we have a way to ensure that they have at least the same number as first semester for instruction. So I just want to know that what I'm recommending is based on the staff's vote. So the majority of what the staff chose. I'm basing what I'm recommending tonight on the feedback, which was simply that in Chagrin, it is important to our staff and to our students to close that semester so that we start new when we come back. And then there was also just a question about, would graduation be in June with that second calendar? And it won't. It will still be in May when it typically falls, which is before Memorial Day weekend. So that will be fine. We checked everything and made sure that that was still going to be the way, because I don't believe graduation is actually noted on that calendar that was voted on. And that was a question that some people had picked up on. Because if you're going later, wouldn't graduation be later? And so we worked through all of that and made sure everything was fine. So I honestly believe, given the parameters in which these calendars were developed for this year, that this is the best calendar to recommend. And I also believe that it also gives us an opportunity to learn and to say, where are places that maybe when we negotiate a new agreement, can we grow and can we make stronger and elevate? But I want to tell you, getting feedback is okay. It was okay that there were concerns about what was presented. And it was really good for at least my team to go through the experience. I kind of joked that I brought the calendar first with me because I'm very used to this process of having the 30 days and lots of feedback, because we had a fair the first week of school. And so it was whether or not you took the first week of school off. But I was really happy with how the process worked. I was very proud of all the staff, the union, for doing their process and getting us the right to get people to participate, and then being able to take the greatest number of votes and putting that and being able to try to sustain what the staff wanted, but ensuring all along that our students benefit. And we have some super creative people in our people directors with Jen Banko and Jared Mulliman. And they were already saying, I think we have some ideas. We can create some studio hours possibly and give extra time, because art was one of the areas where they have a lot of first semester heavy classes. And we just want to ensure that we can offer them or help them be creative. So the calendar I'm recommending tonight has one change, and that would be the day of Records Day. Do you have any questions? I guess I didn't ask about this.
Excellent.
Yep.
That's an excellent outcome. All right, moving along. This is the point in our meeting where we have the opportunity for public participation. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the board? If so, I will read our parameters, but I don't see anyone, so I will move along. Could I have a motion for consent agenda item 5.01?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? All right, Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Could I have a motion for superintendent's recommendation 6.01?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Jennifer, would you like to walk us through these?
And these should be pretty standard. 6.02 is what we just discussed, and the calendar is attached. 6.03 would be administrative contracts. I do want to just at least remind you, the process in Northeast Ohio was to renew these, which would have been last spring. So you typically do them in advance. These contracts actually expire in July of this year. So you'll see a second round of admin contracts come through, and those would be the ones that will expire next year. I just asked for a delay, if you will, because I was new and still learning my staff and my team and how I could support. So we delayed renewing their contracts last year. And I think they are all doing phenomenal, and the recommendations are listed. 604 would be substitute teachers. 605, these are some supplementals and some school year, some classified substitutes there at the bottom. 606 would be resignations. Some files are attached. 607 is FMLA, which would be extended leave. 608 is kind of interesting, and he gave a little bit of information, but we do oversee our Performing Arts Academy, and so we do make the approvals for them, and they're going to do a trip, an overnight trip to help produce one of their videos, and so I think he gave you some information there about that. 609 would be community ed and approving people for some different staffing. And then that is all I have because of the 7.
Any questions? Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Rose,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Treasurer recommendations. Could I have a motion for 7.01?
So moved.
In a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, would you like to walk us through these?
Yes, 7.02 is equipment disposal. These are items that we are no longer using and we would like to get rid of. I want to say thank you to all of the departments and maintenance in particular, and all the way from top to bottom, with staying on top of this stuff and getting rid of things and not sticking them in a closet or in a hallway until the end of the year, and then trying to have this like mass disposal of items. It's going much smoother than it had in the past, and I really appreciate everybody staying on top of it. Item 7.03 is a then and now certificate. This was for the quality profile. It needed to get printed and we just did not have the purchase order in place on time. 7.04 is Sapphire Digital contract. This is for in October when we met with our insurance committee. Our consultants suggested an additional program that would allow our participants to shop around and find providers. It just makes it easier for them to find lower prices on things, which keeps their cost down, our cost down. When we approved all of that, their contract just was not ready yet. So this is just the contract to get that in place. And then 7.05 is my monthly financial reports for November. So we did not do those yet, and your magic hands didn't work. Mine went like this, like it was like gonna. Up here as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
There you go. Make it a little bigger. Thank you. You can go ahead and move to the first actual report. First report is the general fund summary report, formerly known as the SM2 report. We've got estimated numbers in there throughout the rest of the year. Now that we're kind of moving along, we've got the 5-year forecast in place, which was approved in November. And now we've got estimated amounts for the remainder of the year. So we'll be able to compare and kind of look. I know there's a lot on here. I tried to put boxes around the ending numbers there at the bottom. In the middle there, that's the November column. That is our ending cash balance as of November. Over to the right, you have the year-to-date actual total, or the estimated total, what we expect at the end of the year. And then, no, that's all the way to the right. And then the second one from the end there is including the actual numbers in there with the estimates going forward. It's a little confusing. I'll try to clean that up a little bit, make it, I was struggling with what to label those to make it a little bit more understandable. Nothing significant to point out in November, though. There's not a whole lot of financial activity. We don't start getting our taxes again until this month. Okay, moving on to revenue. Again, in November, not a whole lot happening. State foundation still running right about $150,000 a month. Everything else is pretty standard there. Nothing too exciting. Moving on to general fund expenditures. Again, not a whole lot happening in November. You can see their salaries pretty consistent, benefits pretty consistent as well. No major purchases. Typically, supplies, are heavy in the beginning of the year, and then it kind of dies off as people kind of use up the supply stores that they had. And then once those run out, they'll start making purchases to restock again here pretty soon. Moving on to the next one. This is the comparison, and I feel like this is the most important one when you're like kind of in the middle of the year here. First, at the top there is revenue. That's comparing to the prior 4 years. You can see, like I said, not a whole lot happens in November. But we are consistent. If you look at over to the right is the fiscal year to date portion of it. Revenue is up slightly, which we knew was going to happen. We did expect that. Looking at expenditures, again, very consistent here. Expenditures are up from last year, but if you look at that all the way over to the bottom right there, that compares us to the prior 4 years and where we were at in November of those prior 4 years. So right now we're at almost exactly the same expenditure level we were 4 years ago. So I think that's pretty impressive. I think that's, says a lot about our staff controlling expenditures, the things that the board committed to doing a couple of years ago. Some of those cuts that we made and have been able to still maintain everything that we need in the classroom for our students to succeed. So this is my favorite report every month. I like this one. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is just the cash balance. Again, all those gray lines are the previous 4 years. So you can kind of see we always kind of have the same fluctuations here. Cash balance kicks up in the fall when we get our taxes in. Then as we spend down, and then we'll get our taxes again coming up here shortly. Moving on to the self-insurance. Balance in the self-insurance fund right now is not right now, but at the end of November, was $1.7 million. That's healthy and positive, and it's exactly where we would want to see it. If it continues to grow at this pace, at some point we would look at, it's not going to, because as of January, we had to increase our contributions slightly. But if it did, this is where we would start looking at, okay, what can we do? What do we need to do? Do we take a holiday? Do we, next year would be in a really good position if it continues to maybe, take even a smaller increase. Now, our increases over the last 2 years have been very small, and that's wonderful. And it's exactly what we wanted to see and why we did this. Saving the district money, saving our employees money. It's functioning exactly the way we had hoped. Again, that risk is always there because we are now covering claims out of this balance. So we're holding this balance in here for a reason. It's not just sitting there. It's to pay any claims that would occur going forward. But I'm happy with where it's at right now. Moving on to the financial summary report for all funds. This is just at a fund level, showing you the monthly revenue and expenditures and then the year to date. That is not an error there in the middle there, that November revenue column. Those funds just did not have any revenue. I should have put zeros in there and just probably was in a hurry. So I will correct that so that you can actually see that those are zeros. Negative fund balances at this point in time are just grant funds, which we always expect. And then food service is a negative unencumbered balance. It's not a negative cash balance yet, but it is when you consider the encumbrances, it's a negative unencumbered. Again, we expect that. This is not a fund that makes money anymore. Nobody's self-insurance or nobody's food service fund is making a profit anymore. So we run that in the red until the end of the year. We will then make a transfer to cover it. And then that way we'll know what kind of support the general fund had to supplement that fund. Some districts kind of do it on an as needed basis. Sometimes they do it at the middle of the year, beginning of the year. I prefer to do it at the end just because then we have a real clear and easy way if somebody's looking for how much did the general fund need to support it? But the rest of those grant funds are all, we expect those, we have to spend it first and then they reimburse us. Those are all reimbursement grants. Next report is just the bank reconciliation. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. Those adjustments there to the bank are all items that hit after month end that tends to happen when you have ACH transactions and things like that. Following report is the summary of the deposits and investments. Nice picture there of where our money is. Again, Star Ohio is where we're holding most of our money. You can see the rates there. If you looked at these rates in that third column there, the estimated yield. A year ago, even those looked a lot different. So that's nice to see that continuing, which is contributing to the interest revenue. If you compared our interest revenue that we've received so far this year, we've already received more interest than we received in the entire year last year. So it's great. And then just all of the individual securities that we're holding with Red Tree, if you're interested in looking at CUSIP numbers and such. Don't know why you would be, but if you are, it's there. That is all I have.
Any
Leave.
questions, comments, anyone? No, thank you,
Alright.
Ashley.
I'm recommending your approval.
Can you take the roll, please?
I can, Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Does anyone have any other business they would like to introduce?
The only thing that would be the next meeting, if we could just finalize that special meeting. And we'll make sure that the notice goes out tomorrow. But for a couple of reasons, the first would be the contract that we discussed at intercouncil, and there was such excitement and enthusiasm to get that started. The sooner we would get the contract, the sooner Mike can start setting everything up and working through that. The other item that I really would like to get approved sooner than later would be an MOU. That's a memorandum of understanding. That's with our CFDA, with our teachers. We just want to, we want the board to do their part. The union ratified their part. Now we need to do the vote to just approve how we clarified how we hire ESC employees. And so that's when it's a contracted employee versus a certified employee for the district. And there are differences, but this MOU just kind of clarifies what that process is and how that will work. And so you would see that on Friday. And then there might be one other item we're unsure that's still kind of out there, but special meetings have clear designated purposes that we are only going to vote on these things, and that notice will go out tomorrow morning. So that's within the guidelines, but we just kind of would like to get that tied up this week, if at all possible. So we were looking at Friday morning. We know that there are some things with student drop-offs, so it's going to be a weird time. I'm going to suggest, only because there's an 8:30 meeting in the district that creates a conflict. So maybe if we could do it at around 8:10 a.m. in Sands. In Sands Community Room. And it would just be, again, those 3 items. We get those done, we can answer any questions. And then we would be good until the next thing pops up that was due. We'll be in February. This is an emergency. If that works. And then actually we can do the notice tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Sorry, that was all. that I
No,
wanted
that's
to
good.
talk through.
Okay, so. We ready? Executive session?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to executive session for the purpose of discussing employment and compensation of a public employee or official. Oh, and preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other items, conditions of their employment.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros.
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And we do not plan to